Welcome to another rerun commentary of superhero gaming with Andrew. Here I'll be going over the Avengers beta, in which the game is basically going to come out this week, in which I'm very excited. And, man, I'll tell you this. I feel bad for Crystal Dynamics because they've had a lot of heat and backlash over the years of the Avengers game, in which, true, they didn't show us much, in which that's very aggravating, but I think they did a really good job by the looks of it. A lot of people say it looks bad or it plays bad. I honestly disagree. And that's not to say I didn't have issues with the gameplay of the beta, but I do notice, like, for Thor, and also, well, mainly for Thor, and a little bit of the other characters that they took inspiration from the God of War game, in which they did have developers from Santa Monica who did that game helped develop this game as well, who joined the team. And I'll tell you this, it felt so good, the combat and whatnot, especially slinging around Mjolnir, Thor's hammer. It's just so cool. And, what else? But yeah, combat's smooth and whatnot. And I know people say that the camera's bad, but, honestly, it's not that noticeable. I've had way worse camera experiences. But yeah, and I love that. Like, you hold the triangle button to unleash your powers, and this is where the one of those Kratos moments comes from. Like, you throw it, comes back, and it took the other guy out. I thought that was so cool. Yeah, that was awesome right there. And for some of the things I had a problem with the beta is that, one, some of the weekly and daily challenges are like, I would do them like a million times and yet it wouldn't count for it. Or, like for Iron Man's, like when he dodges or whatever, when you do like a power counterattack, that the missile wouldn't lock onto the bad guys and it just missed them. And yeah, so, and from what I saw on the second ward table, and in which I thought that was very appropriate how they honored Chadwick Boseman, of moment of silence, because, I got the idea of, because I thought it was important to do that on my channel, to recognize and mourn with everyone, because I felt really sad about Chadwick Boseman's passing. But yeah, and I can't wait for Black Panther to be on Avengers game. Yeah, so sorry. But I do believe that we'll see Chadwick again in the next life. I really do. Sorry. Not to get all religious, but I honestly do believe that. Now, where were we? Yes. So these guys with the shields, it was tough, but, and I got this trick from God of War that if you threw your hammer or axe ahead, and if you recall it, you can hit the guys from behind, and I was like, that's a cool trick to take care of guys with shield, to leave them open. Now for the Iron Man one of steering, and I did good, but man, it was like tough to like aim and fly, and I realized looking at this I'm flying a bit like a drunken sailor. Nothing against sailors, but yeah. and other things. About another thing that this game does that's a lot like God of War is the where you parry enemy attacks, and and I thought this was smart of Crystal Dynamics. Like every character they show it where it's not that radically different, like layout design, but it does feel different, and each character plays differently. So basically, not all characters have the same moves, but they have the same button and button layouts of like square, wide attack, triangle, power, heavy attack to hold it for power attack, and like basically like triggers for like aiming and shooting, in which I thought that was clever, and the characters play differently of like their powers and whatnot. It's really cool. Iron Man, I really enjoyed Iron Man, and I enjoyed all the Avengers. I really did. It just, let me tell you, Iron Man's a little tricky because of like aiming and whatnot. But I just had to learn that, just go with it. Because usually I do really well at shooters, but it's like when I'm moving or whatever. So I decided later on, just make it simple, hold still, shoot, and there's this awesome thing for later on when you upgrade to these things where when you're flying, going forward, it'll automatically lock on with lasers and rockets to shoot at the bad guys. So yeah. And I thought this was really cool. I really liked Hulk because at first I thought, well, Hulk's gameplay and the way he isn't very nuanced or combo driven oriented. Again, I was wrong. I saw GBG do it, and man, he did really good. And I loved doing like mad combos, even as a little kid. Not because of them, but because I like putting moves together and doing it where they looks really cool. And when I first saw the trailer gameplay for the game, seeing Hulk, I thought Hulk could only grab guys and then smack them with each other, and I was upset about that. I was like, wait, he can't punch him? But I was wrong about that. So yeah, there were glitches with like the PS4 recording thing, because it wouldn't let me record everything. Well, it would like skip some things, in which that's very frustrating. And but I'm working on getting that fixed. Whoa! And that's another problem, is that with Hulk's jumps, it feels like it's like pretty short of like what you want to go and whatnot. Which, and I did compare this game to the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction, in which that game you could like really run, jump, sprint up, climb walls and run on them, but on the side of buildings. But again, that wouldn't be a fair comparison, because especially with like heavy detail and graphics of the game, it's like God of War mixed with X-Men Legends of like level design, in which looks really cool, but they don't have anything where you can go really like high up, because there are limits to the levels. I noticed that of trying that with like flying around as Iron Man in one of them. But it did feel pretty open world, some of the open world levels, which was really impressive. And I thought that was very clever of the developers, and I felt like Uncharted games have revolutionized gaming of like showing like color or something to make it pop out, to give a signal to the players, jump off this or grab onto this. And I thought that was awesome, and I love that moment when Hulk just like kicks that guy and the guy's like, oh crap. I thought that was funny. But yeah, and we'll play the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction later down the line. I thought it was clever how they handled the game. Is that true? These people are a team, but they each have their own personality and ego, and they have fights amongst themselves, but they do still come together and focus on helping people. And I thought, and this was a shocker, that in this game, Tony Stark made weapons for the bad guy. No, not bad guys. The good guys. It's just the good guys. He would never make weapons for the bad guys. But yeah, I thought that was so interesting about that. Oh, that was so cool. I thought the way they did Captain America here was really awesome. Just the way his movement and everything, every character again feels so different, and it feels so good. Man, just seeing this makes me want to play the game again, in which I am so excited for it. And I know Spider-Man and Black Panther are going to be in the game, and with some of the leaks of hearing of who's going to be in the game, I do hope, and this is just me, that Wolverine is in the game too, because he was in the new Avengers lineup, one of my favorite and lineup of the Avengers ever. I think that's cool. So there's different ways to take on shielded enemies. You don't have to always just hold down the triangle button. You can do it with powers. You can like vault over them with certain characters, or you could just, if you have a throwable object that you can return, you can just do that. There's our villain, MODOK. Okay, but what was I saying before? So pairing. I'm so sorry, guys. I switch between talking about things at times. So he talked about like pairing. Oh, Iron Man. So yeah, Iron Man, in which was a shocker for me, is he made weapons again. In which, not for the bad guys, though the bad guys do steal the weapons from the good guys and use them in this game. It just, I've always known, and it was like canon, that Iron Man would not make weapons anymore. But I guess something must have happened to change Iron Man's mind, in which I hope they explore that in this game. And yeah, and Iron Man is still a good guy, so yeah. And there's Kamala Khan right here. She's a fun character to play as, and you know, growing up, I never really appreciated the youthful representation of superheroes. Like, for example, Robin with Batman and Jubilee with the X-Men. Like, basically, someone young, or well, I don't want to call him a sidekick, but someone that represents the mascot, in which you get to learn about these characters through young eyes. In which, looking back, I realize, you know what, that's incredibly invaluable. In which, I don't know if I said that wrong, but it's incredibly valuable. So that kids can automatically relate to him, and you get to see the characters and the world through their eyes. And, in which, interesting enough, Jubilee's costume was based off of Robin's costume by Jim Lee. And I thought that was, like, really interesting. Because, and you know, and I saw it with the boots, the gloves, and the, you know, basically everything except for, well, I see it with the trench coat. It was supposed to be the cape, and man, I love that time of the 90s of, like, trench coats, tough guyness, and extreme art, in which we are starting to see Revenge of the 90s, in which I'm glad, because I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s. So yeah, and Black Widow is very cool in this game. She's like a ninja and very sneaky and whatnot, in which, and I do see when they bring Spider-Man into the game, in which I imagine they're gonna mix like gameplay styles of like Black Widow and Iron Man, in which I'll explain. So Black Widow, in which her parry attack is also a grapple, in which she can like send herself with her line to the bad guys, in which I do see that, and her swinging and zip animations, and Iron Man with his like his heavy attack is basically his repulsors and whatnot. So I do see that, and then Crystal Dynamics did confirm that there are different gadgets that Spider-Man will have, and I do see like that being done for Spider-Man's gameplay. So yeah, and Black Widow hits like incredibly hard, and I mean it's really cool. And she's really tough and like scary good. Yeah, and here I am just, I'm so used to like Spider-Man gameplay or God of War. Oh yeah, that's right, because I played God of War after, right before this. And I'm so used to like the X button being like the dodge. Or, is that right? Or, I think so, but sorry. But yeah, I think that's so cool. I do love flaming swords. I think that is just totally awesome. Lightsabers are cool, but I'm talking about swords with flames at the end of them. Taskmaster is a cool villain. Oh yeah, and this took a while to like master of like the whole grapple counter, which I love that. It's really cool. And the powers that each character have is really cool and different and very empowering, like their power moves. And in which I think that's important, because there are times in the game where you'll get yourself into a tight jam and you need something to get out of there. What else? Oh, I just realized that. I was lucky that I survived this encounter. Again, I love that slow-mo after dodging an attack.
You giving up? No, where is your investigation left you? You're not the brains behind this. And this smells like
yeah, that was frustrating where I couldn't hit him for a while. In which it was a treat to go invisible and just beat the crap out of him.
What's the matter? Don't like surprises?
But yeah, some of my favorite stories with Taskmaster, in which I want to count this one, but you know, this story isn't very heavy driven of Taskmaster, but I do remember playing Taskmaster in Marvel's Spider-Man, in which you fight against him, in which I thought that was really cool. And I don't care what people think. I do think that these the Avengers and Marvel's Spider-Man is connected. So yeah, because of the Taskmaster character and Daily Bugle and such. And I thought that was so cool that they brought a character from Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross's work, Marvels. They brought in Phil Sheldon. Oh, that's. I hope they fix that up when the game launches. Because glitches like that kind of make my hairs stand, in which I get it, but still pretty uncomfortable. Yeah, poor kid. Again, totally incredible amount of value of like having a youth mascot that like you see the world and the heroes through their eyes.
Our beloved Captain America was
And
killed
yeah,
during
I
the
don't
Avengers
believe Captain America is
technology.
dead.
Thousands of
Not one
other
bit.
innocent people died.
And there's Bruce Banner's ex-girlfriend that she's a total psycho.
To emerge with dangerous, otherworldly powers.
There's
With
Inferno.
no known cure, the disease has spread across the country, and while both SHIELD and the
Yeah,
Avengers
and you know what drives me nuts? No matter how much good the Avengers do, and which this is true in real life, there are protesters that'll say, like, Avengers bad, and good guys bad, in which I'm not saying all protesters are bad, in which they're protesting that one has got to happen. But if it's against a group of people that are good and whatnot, that always do their best, saves the day and whatnot, in which they had no control over the bad that happened, in which everyone is caught off guard. And I have a feeling MODOK was behind the catastrophe of A-Day. I'm here to tell you, I honestly do believe that. And he straight out lies, because he was literally near the reactor where Captain America was. Which, that drives me nuts. Liars, liars, liars. In which we gotta be careful, because in the real world, it drives me nuts of how sometimes people can be so naive of like and and I like to believe I take people at their word, but there are people that'll lie just to get attention or to like say, hey, I'm on your side and whatnot, and we're gonna do things and make things better for you. And through my years, I'm a little skeptical, and I'm like, okay, how are you planning on achieving that? How will that affect everything? So, yeah, because, AIM, even though this is a fiction story, it does carry, like, so many human truths, especially in our world today, in which, because if those big changes that are for the best of humanity come at a huge cost for others, then it's not worth it whatsoever. In which that's the truth. And I honestly, and I know this sounds stupid, I still believe in like people's words and trusting them, but I always remember like this person is known to screw up, known to do this or take advantage of someone. I'll forgive them, but I'm still gonna remember, and I'm gonna like not trust that person entirely. Still be kind to them, but yeah, that's just me, because man, I can't tell you how many times I got screwed over, heck, even as a kid, for like people who like either had the best intentions or basically screwed it up for everyone and was a total jerk, or like straight out take advantage of someone. So yeah. And someone says, I'm getting Last of Us vibes from this mission, in which, yeah, I can see that, but not from the characters, the way they act. I do see it with, like, Bruce and Kamala, but, yeah, but that's it as far as it is. And I do appreciate how video games have come far, where the characters are allowed to act more, and there's more story content and cinematics. That the games are more rich. I love that. In which, from the last ward table, I noticed, why is the Hulk bearded and bruised? In which, I have a theory about this. I have a theory that after A-Day, Hulk just remained Hulk. Like, after, like, that whole press conference thing, like, I think, like, in which it's proven in the Spider-Man comic book, in which Spider-Man had to face someone like Hulk, in which he's basically a gamma zombie, in which the Hulk, he can Hulk out and whatnot, but he's constantly, like, spending huge amounts of energy for his body, in which he needs to go back to being turned into Bruce Banner to recharge back, in which that makes sense. That's basic human biology right there. So yeah, and I think he's bruised because one, he's tired, he's weary, he's been beaten up and whatnot, and again, he needs Banner to like calm down. And I love the duality with like Banner and Hulk, the whole multiple personalities disorder, Jekyll and Hyde. Again, Stan Lee, such a genius of like, I want to make a monster, turn a monster into a hero, where basically he's misunderstood, he's hunted and whatnot, and took two inspirations, Jekyll and Hyde and Frankenstein. And again, genius, because I love Frankenstein and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So cool. And also, I find it interesting is that Bruce Banner and Hulk hate each other from usual canon perspective, but they're the same person. They really are. Two parts of the same, two sides of the same coin. And what's interesting is, and this is just me, one cannot live without the other. Hulk needs Bruce Banner as like someone to like give reason and control and like somewhat of a comfort. And Bruce Banner needs the Hulk, someone to stick up for him and be there for him, in which they heavily need each other, and in which I honestly do believe that, in which that has been proven in Hulk comic books, in which, yeah. And the Hulk was born long before the Gamma Bomb. The Gamma Bomb is what brought him into the world. And again, I thought that was so clever because in my mind it's like, how are they going to do the whole aim and shoot thing with the Hulk? Simple. Just while you're aiming, you bring up like a piece of chunk of rock and you can get a bigger chunk of rock. But yeah, it makes everything so much easier and it works so well. But yeah, the Hulk was actually born as in Bruce Banner's psyche after the death of his mother when he was a child, in which it was so traumatic because he had a scumbag dad who abused both of them, and his mom died because of the scumbag dad. And which again, it's like, man, I really do feel for him. But, oh boy, what else? Oh yeah, I never did tell you my favorite Taskmaster stories. Okay, so, in which I only have really two of them. One is in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, in which I thought they handled Taskmaster with Clancy Brown really good. How he's a creepy guy and he takes out the high school coach and he's like, "Well, coach, looks like you made that, finally broke that football state record," after like critically injuring him, and poses as a fitness teacher and a coach to like find out who Spider-Man is, in which that was awesome. And another one, it's a short story done, I think, like Christos Cage or from Dan Slott. Yeah, and as you can see right here, it took a while for me to get used to Hulk's jumping, and I noticed down the line of the beta, they did kind of fix it, which thank goodness, because I felt like you couldn't jump long enough, you couldn't jump enough, or where basically it was just, let's say I was challenged, basically. But yeah, the short story of Taskmaster is where the Avengers initiative happened, and which there's an Avengers team, which it's after Civil War, and there's an Avengers training camp, and one of the young heroes accidentally killed the other, in which basically he's the great-great-grandson of the creator of the super soldier serum, in which they have the he became a super soldier and was raised to be by his parents ever since as a kid, but not through like crazy science, mad science, what have you, but through like revolutionary diet and exercise. And I'm like, whoa. So yeah, I thought that was like so cool. And when Hank Pym, in which he was Yellow Jacket, that's a story for another day, the good kind from the comics, he was like, whoa, what, the secret to the super soldier serum that everyone's been wanting for years. And he was with a crazy scientist guy. He's like, regular diet and exercise? And I realized this story has nothing to do with Taskmaster. So basically, short story short, the hero that died was cloned and brought back to the family to make it seem like he never died in the first place. And I'm like, man, that's kind of dark. And Taskmaster is like studying Spider-Man's moves on screen, and he's like practicing them, and he tells the clone kid, hey, shut up, kid, I don't care about your melodrama of like being a clone or whatever, I'm working here. I'm like harsh but funny. But yeah.
You distract him.
And you know, and I saw the character reveal when I was talking earlier for Kate Bishop, and I was like, cool, awesome. Though I was worried, it's like, are they going to make her exactly like Hawkeye, Clint Barton, in which they're both Hawkeyes, but from gameplay-wise and what I've saw, it looks like not, in which I'm like, oh, thank goodness, because that'd be bad if you just do that. Oh, another thing that I love about breaking the guards, the shielding of bad guys, is you could just, as the Hulk, grab 1 to 2 guys and just smack them to the guy, and the shield just can't take it. Or use the rage thing to, like, you know, pummel them and break their shields. Yep. And which the rage also, like, helps, like, regenerate you. And I think that's a perfect way to empower the Hulk, and yet to also, like, ground him into the reality of a video game. Because as much as I love the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction, he was so incredibly overpowered. And yeah, where you kind of get bored easily because you're like, you know what, none of these guys are gonna they're a threat to me. So yeah. Oh, and another thing that I hate is when you grab guys, or heck, even some rubble to throw at or beat the crap out of someone with, if you're even something as simply as shot or even punched by a guy, in which that shouldn't cause no damage to the Hulk, immediately the Hulk, like, staggers and gets hurt and lets go of all that. And I'm like, oh, that is stupid. I get it, like, for the sake of grounding of the game that they do that, but for characters that small and bullets, in which that never really bothered the Hulk before, I just found that stupid. And I do think, in which I was right, that because in the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction, I was like hoping, waiting for years for a sequel, and I was like, in the next game, you'll be able to carry 2 trucks, like 1 truck per hand, and which, now looking back, I realize, yeah, that's kind of dumb, and not really practical, but, you know, they did take that idea, in which grabbing 2 guys, in which I think that is clever. Very clever. And I love it, like, when you, like, go to smack 2 enemies together, where they, like, you have them hug it out, they'll be like, no, 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 no! It's just so funny. And, yeah, I feel like the game does a really good job of introducing new character types and intertwining them with the story, and I'm excited for Kate Bishop and Hawkeye, in which they're obviously going to be in there because they rock and they're really awesome and cool, and I love their characters. But I'm really looking forward to, like, again, Wolverine, Black Panther, and Spider-Man. And, again, I accepted the fact of, like, maybe what I said earlier is that the whole, with what Marvel said, is like Insomniac Spider-Man is not going to be in this game, and maybe they'll pull a switcheroo and be like, we were teasing you the whole time. But no, I honestly accepted that it'll be this world's version of a game, in which I still don't believe of, like, they're separate worlds. I just honestly don't. I mean, yeah, in which I think it's really cool for, like, Bill Roseman and Marvel Games to let the studios of each game do their own take of its world, without, like, having to be tied to any worlds, kind of like the MCU, in which, not anything bad with that, I've heard stories of, like, how it was very limiting for some creators, and, and I can imagine that. But nothing against the MCU, I love it, in which I get it. Just, it was kind of repetitive at one point, with one or two movies with the same looks, feel, and, like, that was, like, for Captain America Civil War and Ultron, in which, I get it. From an artistic point of view, you want to get a sense, like, this is something where this connects and whatnot, and it's like darker story set for a new age, a new phase in the MCU. So yeah, and I get it, and I'm grateful that they did the movies where they're all interconnected and whatnot. I think that's really cool, and not to bash up the whole let each creator have their own deal and make their own take in their own world, in which that's what the DC movies are doing, in which I think that's smart to really differentiate itself. And I heard of they're actually going to do Zack Snyder's Justice League cut, in which I'm like, you know what? That's cool. Though I haven't been a part of the group, though I do believe, after watching I'll admit, I was one of those guys thinking, man, Zack Snyder, I can't take it with his heroes, especially Batman, like, killing people. Wonder Woman, I understand, but Superman, Batman, no. But I did appreciate he brought in, like, Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, in which I thought that was really cool. And, okay, I'm gonna stop. This is an Avengers game, a Marvel's game. I'll talk about DC stuff later. But yeah. So let's just say I'm glad that they're bringing the Snyder cut, because I wasn't all that wild about Joss Whedon's, like, remake of the film. Even though, which I'm sad to hear the news of, like, which it seems like to be the case, where he was very abusive on set, and I'm like, oh man. And it's heartbreaking to hear, like, one of your hero creators being like that, and, again, brings back to a Static Shock show, in which Static Shock's dad is like, because Static is like, I can't believe Green Lantern went bad, in which it was Sinestro in disguise, and his dad's like, well, son, just because he's a hero and a good guy doesn't mean that he's not human and prone to make mistakes. That's human nature. So yeah, everyone's human. So yeah. So, what was I saying? But, yeah, I told you about Taskmaster. Yeah, and I told you about the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction. And, man, I don't know who the writer was for this game, but I thought the way they tackled this story was, like, very clever and very smart. When I first heard of it and seen the trailers, I thought, oh boy, this is just gonna be a remake of, like, that Avengers cartoon show, Avengers Assemble, in which the Inhumans are outlawed and whatnot, and they're gonna like soften down the story and wait for a real bad guy to come down in the later sequel, like with. And I was wrong to think of it this way, in which there's no such thing as a soft villain. In which I kind of got that impression and idea from the first Justice League movie, especially Joss Whedon's one. Only from Joss Whedon's one. In which I am excited to see Zack Snyder's vision. Because I do like his sense of, okay, stop, Andrew, stop. Okay, sorry. But, yeah, and I was wrong to think that. Every villain. Doc Ock is a big, huge villain, including MODOK. And it turns out they weren't, like, rehashing things, and I was from the time in which they made the Inhumans, in which I get it, with powers and whatnot, but they're more of a kingdom and whatnot, and, like, oh man, how do I say this? Like, basically gave them, like, problems what the mutants had in the world of X-Men. Well, and the X-Men's part of the Marvel universe, and at first I'm like, I was like one of the fans, like, is Marvel gonna get rid of the X-Men and let the Inhumans take over? But then I realized that wasn't the case. But it was very annoying of like how felt like very copy and paste. And I was worried that this game was going to be like that, but it turns out it wasn't. And I thought the way they handled the story, and I don't know who wrote this story, but they did a good job. I really like it. And that they tied the MODOK to the Avengers. Like Venom with Spider-Man, and like Marvel's Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4, Spider-Man with Doc Ock. In which I thought that was so clever. And Insomniac, I do apologize for saying that, of thinking like they're giving us a soft villain to save us off for a real hardcore villain. I'm sorry, I take that back. I was wrong to think that way. Venom and Doc Ock are equal great measures villains. Sorry. And so is MODOK. Forget what I said. Yeah, forget what I said, guys. Sometimes I ramble, and I'm stupid at times. Okay, that's harsh. But yeah. And I thought that was interesting, because Charles Carlton, or whatever his name is, the MODOK's character, like, he's very enticing, in which, again, like, I love it, like, with the villains like Kingpin and Magneto, in which it all came from Magneto, because Magneto was the villain in the Marvel Universe originally, and there's those early stages of the Marvel Universe as like the relatable villain character that you can see where he comes from, and you can see in his shoes and perspective doing what he does, in which, again, I love great human villains in which they have different ideologies, in which it does battle with the heroes. Yeah. And it drove me nuts that these Exos can, like, take on the Hulk, in which, you know, the more I think about it, it makes sense. Aim is aim. And one story that I haven't read, but I've heard, in which I thought it was so wild, that one of the Avengers, in which he's also was a member of New Mutants, well, two of them, Cannonball and not Sunfire, I'm trying to remember his name, crap, sorry, that they bought Advanced Ideas mechanics, made them good guys, and like use them to help save the world. And I'm like, whoa, that is wild. And cool, and they had their own special team of Avengers and whatnot, like General Ross at that time, and he was the Red Hulk, in which he didn't have a mustache, in which it didn't show, but on the team of AIM Avengers, it did show it. It was so wild. A Hulk with a red Hulk with a mustache, glasses that looks like a hulked out Arnold Schwarzenegger with a mustache. Yeah. So, yeah, I do feel bad of what I said. Doc Ock is such a great villain, and so is like Mr. Negative. They're like all terrifying, also incredibly relatable humans with their own ideologies, in which I totally see and get, in which they challenge the hero's ideologies. So yeah, they're not soft villains. I totally take that back. And plus, I used to view MODOK, as much as I love him, as a B-list villain. But again, Brian Michael Bendis, like, taught everyone and show everyone from time to time. A great creator treats every character like it's an A-list character. In which, at his starting point of time with Iron Man was considered a B-list character in Captain America, and that was before the MCU. So, in which I want to go into that, because Marvel Studios, this was during the time in which Spider-Man 3, X-Men 3, The Last Stand, they didn't do so well, and basically the superhero movies felt like they're starting to burn out. So Marvel wanted to do their own movies of their own characters, and I thought it was so smart. And Marvel Studios was basically, it's been around longer than anything except for their filming department, because they just do the cartoon shows for Marvel, like Wolverine and the X-Men and X-Men Evolution. And honestly, I'm like, no offense to the creators of the Marvel cartoons now, but I wish Marvel Studios would do the cartoons as well, because honestly, the Marvel cartoon shows nowadays on Disney is just, I hate to say it, but straight up garbage. I'm sorry, but, and you can disagree with me. Everyone has their own taste, and that you have right to your favorites. Please don't ever feel swayed because of me, because I used to be swayed a lot, like, years ago, by other people's opinions. So yeah, please don't feel swayed by that. If you love the shows, that's awesome. I'm happy for you. But, yeah, I just don't like them as much, because I feel like they treat the audience like idiots, and it's like very cringe-worthy, and there's no like great human elements. They just throw stuff in there, which is a great antithesis of what Marvel's about. It's about putting the human in superhuman, in which that's what Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, and Steve Ditko set out to do. I thought it's so cool that they set up these chests and whatnot. Yeah, I love it. And the gear in which you have Pym particles to shrink enemies. But, okay, sorry, back to the MCU. So, yeah. In which everyone, even the news, are like, wow, they're going to make movies of B-list characters, in which some even consider them C-list, like Thor, Iron Man, Captain America. And I'm like, and in my mind, I love those characters even before the movies came out. I loved the Avengers. I really did. I thought they were really cool. True, I didn't have such a great love and understanding of, like, them as, like, for their human characters, but, yeah, it was until, like, yeah, the MCU movies that increased my love, furthered my education, because that's what it did with Spider-Man, with the first Spider-Man movie. So, yeah. In which I do think that the cartoons and the movies are very important, because Neil Adams said that they're very important because they get people into the comics, and I do believe that, because I got into comics and had a greater understanding of them because of the cartoon shows in the 90s and also the movies, in which they're great advertisement for the comics. If only we can solve something in which we can let the audience know, is like, hey, this is how it works, of like teaching them of like, this is our version of PG-13, this is our version for rated R, this is our version for rated G and rated PG, and you'll like our stuff. Because, you know, and I'll admit, it was, when I was learning of, like, getting into comic books, it was a lot of trial and error of, like, learning, in which I wish, again, there were stores that, like, you know, taught all the things that I had to learn and made it so much easier for everyone. So, yeah. Yeah, I love the swinging animations. I just wish they'd do more of it. I mean, especially if they're going to do Spider-Man. I mean, you gotta have more of it around for you to swing around. And it was a little tricky to learn. It really was. And I love how the game developers handled Kamala's character of the whole embiggen and using the lock and aim. Okay, not lock, but like aim and hit thing of like her big flying fist. But yeah, back to the MCU. So yeah, in which Iron Man, the first movie, blew everything out of the water, and I remember, and not to speak ill of my father, in which totally understandable is one. Sometimes when you see like, or never mind, forget it. But we were wrong to think the worst, or forget it. Okay, so yeah, Robert Downey Jr. was cast to play Iron Man, and my dad's like, "Oh wow, him," and like you know, and we didn't know how much he changed and how much he became such a better human being, because he was and he is still literally Iron Man. Because Iron Man's all about making up for your flawed mistakes and like doing better and building yourself back up, in which that is so inspirational. And yeah, that's another thing that drives me nuts. The whole like, you can't do that. In which I hope they do that away with that. That was stupid. But yeah, I thought it was very cool that they did these, but I didn't get it with the whole Stark Gold thing. I mean, cool. I mean, what does that have to do to pertain to the Marvel Universe? But yeah, back to the MCU of like, again, I really love the characters, but I didn't really know their alter egos so much, and I'm grateful for the movies doing that. And I just loved, capital L, loved the MCU movies. And when I first saw the first Iron Man movie, I thought it was just going to be a standalone movie, standalone universe. But when I, you know, heard about the end credits and the Avengers Initiative, I was shocked, and I was like, and I said to my dad, we gotta go back and see the movie and the after credits. And I saw it, could not believe my eyes. Like, wow, they're gonna literally make the movies just like the comic books. And it was wild, and it was like the Nick Fury was based off the Ultimates version. Yeah, Nick Fury in the comics wasn't always black. He was originally a white guy, and I thought that was genius of Mark Millar and Brian Hitch to base Nick Fury off of Samuel Jackson, because he is literally one of the coolest dudes ever in Hollywood. He is awesome. And Nick, so yeah, plus they made Nick Fury more relatable, more cool, more fun, and yeah, it was just totally wild. And awesome to see that, and I'm like, how are they going to do this? Are they going to blow this or whatever, of assembling the Avengers? And each movie, like Iron Man, Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, Thor, and Captain America was a building block, and you watch after the credits, and I was like so excited. And I'm like, oh my heck, oh my heavens, that's the Cosmic Cube, in which I thought it was clever that they came up with another name for it, in which I understand, because basically it wasn't a straight up Marvel Universe movie, because they took inspiration from the Ultimates universe, And another thing I hate, that they couldn't just let the character like jump over that desk earlier. It was like a lot of trial and error there. But trying to think. But yeah, and and you're like so excited because in your mind it's unfeasible because you've never seen a group of such, which with the X-Men, yeah, you can see it because usually Wolverine in those early movies was like the main character of the movies. They were more Wolverine movies than X-Men movies. But it's still X-Men movies, but still. But yeah, I thought that was so, yeah, when I saw the preview for the Avengers movie after Captain America, the first Avenger, I was so excited, like, holy crap, they're really going to do this. And in my mind, I'm wondering, how are they going to do this? And I thought it was so smart that they had Joss Whedon, and yeah, that was a big mistake right there. They should have had an animation, because that felt very clunky right there, just like her straight up walking through that. No person would do that. They would, like, there would have been an animation. Yeah, when I saw the movie, I loved it, really enjoyed it, but I felt like the first movie didn't do justice to Hawkeye's character, because I do love Hawkeye, but thank goodness they did justice to his character later on, and he's getting his own Disney Plus show. I'm excited. And I was blown away, and I thought, the way they handled it is like, this is how the comic books would handle and treat the characters with such seriousness. And I felt like, and this was just me, before that, Fox and Sony and Universal, they didn't do that for the characters of treating them with such seriousness and such respect and translate them well. In which, I will tell you this, not to slam the Sam Raimi movies, in which Sam Raimi, he totally translated the character of Spider-Man, and so did Bryan Singer on X-Men, that they were totally translated very well, in which great creators that took the helm of the projects, that basically you can tell from a movie if it was like really created out of love and respect and hard work by creators versus like a business project, a business movie transaction deal in which it was made basically by executives, by like rules and whatnot. But yeah, in which Sam Raimi totally did that. Not that. Sorry, what I meant to say is Sam Raimi totally translated the Spider-Man character perfectly, and also like showed such reverence to it and treat it with how the fans would treat it. Same with Bryan Singer, in which, again, with what I've heard about him, and I'm just very sad again to hear like such great creators being not so nice people. So yeah. Oh, what else? But for example, in which one of the things I really love about the Avengers movie is like they treat like the forces of evil of like with such, you know, like one as a real human trait and also something very scary, especially in the Avengers movie with like Loki's ally, in which that one creepy guy that served Thanos, in which every scene you see in which it's out in dark outer space and it feels creepy. You feel like you're not on Earth. You don't have a solid landing. Like you can easily fall. That kind of deal. And it was like very horrifying, especially seeing this scary character. Is like, seriously, you're questioning him, in which he's talking to Loki about Thanos, and you're like, yeah, this is how we view the comic books of like how bad guys like Venom, like really scary characters, in which not only made the heroes scared, but the audience too. In which I love that. In which, again, I hate to say it, the Venom movie again didn't give me that sense of fear. in which it was more like a comedy, in which, and I get it. It just, again, I wish that there was more of that fear. And while Spider-Man 3 was so good, and Sam Raimi, he did such a good job, especially with how much expectation and bureaucracy crap he had to deal with from Sony and Avi Arad, of like, in which Venom was going to be in Spider-Man 4, in which there were designs of Venom, and I just liked the ideas that Sam Raimi had for like Venom in the black suit, and I thought that was so clever. It just, again, wasn't all that scary except for like a few moments. But no disrespect to Sam Raimi, because you know what? It wasn't his fault. The executives should have trusted Sam Raimi. They should have, because, you know, Sam Raimi was willing to work with them and work it out with them, and while making the best Spider-Man movie ever for the fans. In which I wish they were more like that towards Sam Raimi, because we could have, you know, not to crap on Spider-Man 3, we could have gotten a better movie. Because again, Joss Whedon said that fans and audiences, they really enjoy these superhero movies only when you give them enough, and where you don't give them too much, where you give them just enough where they can see the stuff play out through the movies. And yeah, and so yeah, that fear of darkness and that huge uneasiness, and like seeing like Loki more unhinged in the Avengers movie more than ever. Like the beginning of the film with that smile he had, so creepy. And it was so cool. And I love how the Avengers interacted, and it was basically a dream come true. And I was blown away. Loved the movie so much. And I'm like, I can't wait to see the next Marvel movie, the next Avengers movie. In which it was so exciting. And I love it. And phase 2, it was like more exciting. Phase 1 was all about like holding my breath, and it's like, oh wow, this is really cool. It's like, please don't screw up, please don't screw up. In which they didn't screw up. And I was like, man, that is awesome. And the movies got better. And honestly, and this is just me, Iron Man 2 wasn't as good as Iron Man 1. That's just me saying, because one, a lot going on, and you could tell, and I honestly think that Marvel Studios was like learning along the way, but they gave a mandate that I felt like Iron Man 2 was more of a trailer and a preview of the Avengers movie. That's just me. I wish, because there were so many great things that I wish they explored more. But still, a great movie, and I love Robert Downey Jr. and I love Jon Favreau. Have such huge respect for those incredibly creative Titanics. So, yeah, and back to the MCU, we got Captain America Winter Soldier, in which I told my friends before, see, I told you, Bucky's not dead. They're like, I hate you. Okay, they weren't like that, but yeah, I loved it, and it was so cool. And I want to tell you a very cool story. A friend of mine named Mike, he, I'll admit, I wasn't always the best, nicest guy to him. I was very dismissal of him at first, and I feel bad for that. I learned my mistake. But I was sick one summer, really sick with pneumonia. And early when I was like, oh boy, and I was a baby all the way up till I was 6, I had asthma and had a hard time breathing. And growing up, I eventually grew out of it. But the summer of 2011, I had asthma so bad that my asthma returned from my experience of pneumonia, in which my oxygen levels were 78%, which is below normal. And it was such a terrifying, hard experience to be at a hospital. Hated it so much. Nothing against the hard workers of the hospital, but man, it was really tough. And coming home and whatnot, and Mike came, and being the nicest guy ever, he, and I've apologized to him of what such a jerk I was. He said, I'm here to take you to the new Captain America movie. I was just blown away by that. He took me to the Captain America movie. We had such a fun time. And one of the best friends I've ever had, period. And when he was taking me home, he stopped by to check on someone to like serve them in need, someone who needed help to make sure they're okay. And I'm like, what the heck was wrong with me? So yeah, and he was nice enough to take me and a bunch of other guys to the first Avengers movie. Again, floored by that. And for Iron Man 3, I kind of treated him and the other guys where I took him to Iron Man 3. I paid for his tickets. And as a thank you to show how much I really appreciated him. Such a nice guy. Had no idea what I was thinking. Yeah, so Mike, if you're watching this, I love you, buddy. Again, I'm sorry. You're the best. But yeah, MCU. And Phase 2 was a whole lot darker and had a lot more risk and whatnot, in which I love Iron Man 3, great, in which it was better than Iron Man 2, but, you know, it lacked a lot of heart that Jon Favreau would bring to Iron Man, in which I felt like Shane Black just made a Shane Black action movie. I'm sorry to say, but it's the truth. But, yeah. And I was wrong to think, like, as a kid, it's like, well, maybe Jon Favreau, he just got lucky on the first one, in which, again, Jon Favreau, I'm so sorry. Because, you know what? That is never the case for any human being. They always, every human being, no matter how much or how little talent they have great capacities for telling great stories and for making incredible pieces of work. So yeah, and that's another thing. That little dot didn't go away. And all it was to see how dusty it was. I'm like, I get it for like a character moment to show Kamala's character, but come on. So yeah. What else do I the event but yeah, and I thought no disrespect to Joe, I forgot the guy's last name, but he directed the first Captain America movie, in which, again, Captain America is really cool, loved him, and it was a propaganda movie, but I'm like, how are they going to handle, bringing Captain America to the first century? And my mind's like, one, make it a spy thriller, and do it where he's stuck in this world of, like, where everything is, like, a world full of compromise and, like, world, like, full of darkness that even the government would work in darkness too, and how he'd struggle with that. So it's basically Superman in the real world, how Superman would struggle with that. In which, again, I thought that was genius of the Russo brothers to take that idea and to go further with that. And how he still stuck up for those ideals and truths of where he came from. Yeah, and I thought they totally made Captain America, Steve Rogers, more relevant as a human being and did a really great job and really showed Captain America, because I felt like they really showed how much of a competent fighter Captain America is. More than a competent fighter. Like, he smashes guys up and he rocks. In which, well, and I'll admit it, as much as I thought Captain America rocks and all that, it didn't give that same level of, like, whole Captain America, like, highlighting him, like, through action scenes as, like, Winter Soldier did in the later movies, in which I thought that was so good. Because, yeah, and there were some things that I noticed in the later movies, like Iron Man not getting his humble pie, like in the Avengers movie, like, it seems like he was like overpowered, where he took on, in which I love it, seeing Hulkbuster versus Hulk. That was awesome. It just, what kind of drove me nuts is that Iron Man took out Hulk, and Iron Man didn't really receive his humble pie, even from Ultron, the Age of Ultron movie, and just yeah, that's just me, and that Captain America is like, oh man, like seemed like he was like one of the weakest links of the team, in which that is never the case. That should never have been the case, which it never is. Captain America, despite being human, is one of the strongest links in the Avengers, the strongest chain links that holds the team together, both like spiritually and mentally of the team, as well as physically in like combat. So yeah, and I'm glad the Russo brothers, they again, it's such a great job to address those things, had the characters grow, especially Iron Man, because as much as I love Iron Man, he was just like being a jerk just for the sake of being a one-dimensional jerk. That's it, in which there was no growth, there wasn't really no heart, which I'm grateful for, yeah, that the Russo brothers showed that, and they kind of continued what Jon Favreau was trying to do. And basically, Tony Stark is like, even though he was never close to his dad, got closer to him, like after his dad's death, and where he made peace with his dad, in which I had to do that with like certain extended family relatives of I'm not gonna say who, but where I had to make peace with them, in which they're still alive. I love them and whatnot, but it just, and you know, it takes a bigger person, literally, and you know, Howard Stark wasn't bad, but it takes a bigger person to be like, I love you, I know you did the best you could for me, and I forgive you. And to just appreciate what they're trying to teach you. In which, I love that in Endgame, in which so many people give that movie crap, in which that was the perfect Marvel movie. They couldn't have done it as a standalone Marvel movie, and okay, not like perfect Marvel movie, but the perfect conclusion, because they couldn't have done the movie like a standalone Marvel movie. This was like, almost like, this was 10 years of storytelling coming to its conclusion in this, of the Infinity Saga. So yeah, and oh, yeah, so Maria Hill in this game is played by Jennifer Hell, one of my favorite voice actresses ever. And she was Pepper Potts in the Iron Man VR game. Sorry guys, I'm not going to play that because one, I can't afford a VR at the moment and whatnot. I'm just, again, making do with what I have. But you can see gameplay, in which it looks cool, and plus, I've heard good and not so good things about the game. But yeah, and I thought Jennifer Hell makes a perfect Maria Hill, and it's amazing like how versatile and extremely competent like voice actors and actresses like Jennifer Hell, of like, they do this huge range of roles and whatnot. And I remember she was Black Cat in the 90s Spider-Man show. She was Miss Marvel, basically Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, in which Captain Marvel was Miss Marvel before in the comics, in Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. And she was Zatanna in Justice League Unlimited, Killer Frost in Justice League Unlimited, and Justice League, just plain old Justice League, and many other characters, and I'm just like, wow. But you know, back to the MCU. I thought that was so important for Tony Stark to continue his growth as a character, and I felt like that growth, there wasn't really growth for Iron Man and Iron Man 3. I mean, maybe like, you know, letting go of like, of Iron Man, of like, letting go of making the suits, realizing that he doesn't need the suits to be Iron Man, but I felt like they could have dived more deep into that of like, why is it that he feels like he needs to be Iron Man, of how, and I get it, the whole alien invasion thing, I felt like, again, storytelling wise, that could have been done better. But yeah, and which, thank you Shane Black for the Iron Man 3 movie, it was awesome, but still. But yeah, I just love how the Iron Man grew of like, he becomes a father figure to Peter Parker and remains true to him and tries to, because I didn't like that in the comics where in Civil War, Iron Man like turned on Spider-Man the moment like it was when Spider-Man realized, Captain America was right, and I thought it was appropriate to just only involve Spider-Man, especially his intro to the MCU as like, yeah, sure, Mr. Stark, I'll help you, as like this kid just for this one part, and yeah, and basically a father-son relationship where Tony sees so much of himself in Peter, in which has, again, a lot of reasoning, same reasons as Tony for being Iron Man, of like, with great power, there must also come great responsibility and that sense of guilt for like letting people down and doing the wrong thing. And in which originally Tony was just going to go and get this kid and just bring him on the Avengers and just basically, just have him part of the team and whatnot. He didn't realize how he was going to have such a connection to him. And I thought that was so nice. And I love the way they play that out. My only wish is and I get it, some people's like, Andrew, that saying of great power comes great responsibility isn't a real saying. And I'm like, what, screw that. A lot of sayings in life is like, isn't very realistic, like humbug or like, oh man, what else? Sweet Christmas or other kinds of stuff like that. But, it's tied so integral to Peter Parker, to Spider-Man. So yeah, and I'm not saying that to screw that, screw you, the people who say that, but basically screw realism. Because, still stay true and grounded, but again, this was coming from the time of like the Amazing Spider-Man, in which first movie was okay. I only loved the movie for one, the actors, and just the fact that Spider-Man was a teenager, and just that's it. Just for shallow reasons, because it was either that or I would have gone insane. Because they turned Spider-Man to a B-list character. Sony did. And I know Mark Webb did the best he can do, and even he said that, he thought the whole rebooting of Spider-Man was the stupidest idea in the world. He even said that. But, But yeah, that was my only wish of the whole, with great power comes great responsibility. And I was shocked at first when they aged down Aunt May. And there's this joke is like, it seems that in each movie, Aunt May is like getting younger. Yeah, but I totally understand. And I guess I didn't know Marissa Tomei so much. I heard from a website or whatever that she was a wrestler or whatever. I was like, well, they got a wrestler to play Aunt May? Sorry, Marissa Tomei. I totally got that from a wrong source. But, yeah, and I thought that was appropriate because, again, as much as classic Spider-Man is great, it's very limiting of, like, one classic Spider-Man with basically old grandparents kind of figures is like already been done and tried like so much. Why the Ultimate Spider-Man comics was so good is one, gave them like more real parents, even though they were still technically old. But yeah, and I thought that was appropriate so that one, kids related to him more. Not to say that kids with grandparents who raise them isn't relatable, in which that's not the case. It just, I'm glad they changed it up and they kind of like inserted things from like Miles to like really freshen up Spider-Man, because Spider-Man really did needed some freshen up. In which I thought that was so stupid of Sony. They got him in high school, and then they took him out of high school and just put him in what did they put him in college? And I'm like, what was the point of putting him in high school in the first place? So yeah, thank goodness for the MCU, because they honestly know what they're doing. And they work so hard to make this the best kind of experience ever, in which I wish everyone in comics would like strive for the example that the MCU would, and also for like, you know, Marvel games and how DC are doing in their movies now, of like give the artists space of like, let them do their own vision, show their own take of things, but show real growth of the characters, and be like very respectful, because again, in early 2000s comic books changed for the better, where it was like very story driven. Not that the art wasn't important, because that was another reason why I bought. It was for the writer, the artist, the brand, the characters. But yeah, the
What's inside that AIM building?
oh,
There should be an external locking mechanism
Eh,
you can use to
that was
open the door.
stupid.
Right, like a switch or something.
What would be awesome though, that wouldn't be realistic, if like Herbie would come and just come and catch you. It's like, I got you, and you're like, you're supposed to be with the Fantastic Four. I love Herbie. Heck, even the name Herbie. But oh man, this is me just struggling here.
Let's see what's inside.
Yeah, Hulk is no ballerina. But oh yeah, when like early 2000s were Marvel's focus, in which I really loved Marvel more than DC, I have to admit, growing up, comic book wise, because I felt like with DC they did things like wasn't true to the character or did some very weird or shady things, while with Marvel, they stayed true to the characters, took on the spirit, but yet applied it in the real world, which made it really cool for me as a kid. And they treated each issue as a big deal. Well, at least for me anyway, and that it was like a movie, long awaited each issue, and the way they did their covers, especially for like Ultimate Spider-Man and the other Ultimate books. Just how awesome that was. So yeah, in which now I just see that, and it does break my heart to see like some of my favorite writers turn from like taking that approach to like making it like gag books of like gag at the expense of the audience, in which I'm like, that is just stupid. I mean, again, what are comic books? What are movies? What are because true, what are they without? One, the characters. Two, the creators. And three, the fans. The audience. So, yeah. And, you know, and it's frustrating sometimes where it feels like that, and I know creators work so hard on their books, where an issue, a monthly issue, in which Eric Larson said this, in which it's true, a monthly comic book is that person's monthly fix of that comic for a month. Like, it has to, in which, and I'll tell you of like some of how storytelling in comics have changed over the years, in which I can tell you more about that. But but for right now, I'm yeah, back to the MCU. So yeah, and again, the way they handled Iron Man and Civil War, in which Iron Man stayed true. And for those that said Iron Man was very morose, and I'm like, of course he is. He just learned that a kid died in the events of Age of Ultron along with other people. and that he feels very responsible. Same about amount of like guilt, or maybe even more so, of like when he learned that his weapons were used to kill American soldiers, young Americans serving their country and other people. Okay, same amount of guilt. So yeah, and Iron Man is always about battling his demons, doing his best, redeeming himself, and also just one being a better man. It's all about like, and I saw this video essay in which it's true. He wasn't necessarily a villain, though it was basically turning a villain into a hero. In which, yeah, and I thought, that's one of the most amazing things ever, in which why fans love like Songbird, and in which Black Widow in the comics, she was originally a villain. Same with Hawkeye, in which we love that story of redemption, of like how those heroes still struggle with their inner demons, and also how they grow and how they take chances to grow as a human being. Because I was wrong to think as a kid of like, man, it's better not to grow and not to try, because when you do that, you get into trouble and you do stuff. And I realized, you know what, no. Being a human being is all about learning and growing up and making mistakes. It really is. People deserve that. And another thing that drives me nuts here about this game, and I'll get back to what I was saying, is
I'm working on clearing
why?
the signal.
Just like you have to stand in the middle right here of like protecting things, in which I hope so much of the game isn't like that, because I hate that, especially considering I wish it would just stay like an A, at least for a while, because I like it as like, okay, it's an Avengers sanctioned base now, and it'll save you times if like a bad guy is hacking down. But back to, because why we love these stories of these characters is they're human beings trying to do better and be better. Where sometimes they fail and they try again and they succeed. That's what makes these stories so great. What makes comic books, movies, books, art so great. Because we need these stories to remind us that, true, we will fail, but we will always do better, no matter what kind of horrific, nightmarish circumstances we'll stumble across. A lot of times by our own doing. So yeah, and and I thought that was very smart. And the Russo brothers did say this to Kevin Feige. I remember in an interview saying that, is that, Phase 3 should focus on new heroes, because the audience will get so burned out on the old ones. In which, it was true, the superhero fatigue was really coming in. Especially, like, you have to wait a whole lot longer for a whole phase for Thanos. But, and Guardians of the Galaxy. I was a fan of those characters just barely before the movie, because I read Brian Michael Bendis' run on Guardians. And I really love them. Love the characters. And James Gunn, you are a genius. And I honestly am very interested in what you do with Suicide Squad. I really am. But, and I am glad that you're brought back for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And I hope they let you stay on to do the cosmic Marvel hero stuff for the cosmic characters in the future, because I thought that was a mistake to let you go. We've all done and said stupid things in the past. And you know what? And I've been there. I've said and done stupid things. We've all changed and grown. But yeah, not to excuse the actions, but saying that if a person really does make up for their mistakes, then they deserve to be on it. I mean, there's like MCU actors in which Robert Downey Jr. is the example of like, he made mistakes, but here he is being such a great guy, such a great example, helping people, taking care of them, both on and off screen. And, they had, and I'm not going to mention, but Josh Brolin, he had a checkered past too. And yet he seems to be doing a lot better. So yeah. And, oh, what else? But yeah, love Guardians of the Galaxy. And I love the second one, just not as much as the first one. Just for me, because it felt like focus a lot of time on one thing, because on one particular span of time, and didn't have as much of what made Guardians, the first one, great. But I still loved it. I cried when Yondu died. I mean, that was very touching. Of like, where Peter, true, he discovers who his biological dad was, but he knew who his real father was, who his daddy was, in which it was Yondu, who really cared for him and protected him.
Appreciate the sentiment.
So yeah.
Unpleasant existing without instantaneous access will
And I can tell this world, this Avengers game, Nick Fury, took, took the early version of the Ultimates Nick Fury, in which, he's a lot like Samuel Jackson, but he has it where he has
Not having an uplink, I mean.
previous Nick Fury's hair type with like almost like a Mr. Fantastic kind of hair,
I suppose it's
which I'm glad they did that away. Because just straight up Samuel Jackson with an eye patch is one totally dope. And I don't use that word much, but trust me, it is.
Check out all this stuff.
And
Start looking
so yeah, and the MCU was more of a cohesive universe. And back to, Phase 3 was all about introducing new heroes and again, superhero fatigue, in which I experience that from time to time. Even my dad's like, oh, I love watching these movies, but I'm getting tired of them. And, yeah. And especially where other studios, even DC, was trying to catch up to Marvel, in which no one really could. In which, and not to really land blast like Zack Snyder, because he did some really cool things for the DCEU, especially the Wonder Woman director, and she is directing the next one. I know her name in the back of my head,
triggered a classified
but yeah, she seems such a nice lady, and I really like her approach to storytelling, of like integrating where it's a story-driven action sequence, in which it's not like, oh, cool action moment, where you get a moment where it's like, people die, and like, this is the kind of story that happens, in which realistically, yeah, you see it, where it's not your typical action scene, but it's very story-driven. The story still continues, and I really like that, and the story is, the action is driven by the story, so yeah. And, what else? Oh yeah, so MCU, Doctor Strange, awesome. I felt like that movie, how they handled that, it was such a different movie than any other. It was like a horror thriller, and yet give that huge sense of like Steve Ditko's drawing of like looking at something of what it's like to be on drugs, basically. And it was it was a very quiet movie, and just like, I'm like, whoa. It was really cool. And, in which, again, I'm sad to hear that the director of that film isn't doing the sequel to Doctor Strange, but I'm really excited that Sam Raimi is doing Doctor Strange 2, and I do hope that he brings in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man as well of like the similar cast. That'd be so cool. I'd love that. But then again, I know Tobey Maguire, of like heard things of like, yeah, he not very professional, so yeah. Hopefully he'll change, in which I do want people to change, to be better. Not to force them to change, but one, I want everyone to be happy, and two, to do the right thing. not force them to do it. That's their choice. But yeah, heck, I would even be good with like if it's James Franco. Like, what if Harry Osborn became Spider-Man instead of Tobey Maguire? That would be a real head turner. Like, instead of like you see the suit, and when he takes the mask off, holy crap, it's Harry Osborn. He's Spider-Man. So yeah. What else is there that I really... And I was struggling here. Yeah, those laser guys were, like, very tough. I was very intimidated to hear how totally intense some of the enemies were going to be in this game, but I'm like, you know what? They haven't met me. Screw them. I can take them on. And I'm not saying, like, screw the developers. I'm, like, saying screw the bad guys. They think they're the boogeyman. I'm the guy that you send to kill the boogeyman. I love John Wick. So, where was I? Oh yeah, so, and when it was, and I thought, again, Black Panther changed everything. And I love Chadwick Boseman. Just everything. All the creators that were involved for Black Panther, especially for Chadwick Boseman, he was the most integral part of on-screen Black Panther. In which, again, wow, was so impressed with him. Just the way the movie was. Really loved that movie. Yeah, I was like really, yeah, again, still very sad about his passing. I do look forward to the day when we do see him again in the next life. But, where was I? Spider-Man. Oh yeah. And there was gonna be an Inhumans movie in which, and I was very excited, but I thought it was very smart of Marvel to, like, let go of the Inhumans, switch that out for Spider-Man. Because, one, that would have been very tasking, because, man, Kevin Feige does a lot. Like, since he's, like, basically being the godfather of the whole MCU. Yeah, and, again, what they did with Spider-Man, and I love how Taika Waititi revitalized Thor, in which I love Thor, but to me, he was still, before then, still a B-list character. In which he was only... in which, again, the things that got in the way of people really loving Thor was the whole Shakespearean speak and the whole, like, basically, yeah, just that, and you didn't really get to experience, like, Thor's human side. He acted more like a god than anything. But, yeah, and I'm glad that they did all away with that, and Taika Waititi made the character of Thor so relatable. And not only that, funny too, and it was so great, where it immediately became, like, everyone's latest favorite Marvel movie. And Thor, their favorite character, because even though it was a comedy, there was, like, a universal human story in that movie, in which it's all about, like, a son filling in his father's shoe of, like, responsibility of being a king of a kingdom, and dealing with, like something taken away from him, his greatest strength, in which he thought it was Mjolnir, his hammer. And she's like, you know, I'm nothing without it. And his dad's like, you know what, no, are you the god of hammers? No, you're not. You're Thor. And I thought that was, like, totally clever. And, yeah, I wish they'd have made the shield accessible immediately to do that moment right there. But, so, what was I gonna say? But yeah, and I thought, again, where a character's beaten down, and where he's like, you know, my father died, I learned my brother's alive, basically human stories, like, emphasis on human in a superhuman world. and I thought that was like so great. And they brought in like Planet Hulk a little bit into it, in which that was awesome. And you know what? I'm gonna say this: Universal, you suck for not letting the MCU do a Hulk movie and whatnot. And there's Phil Sheldon of Daily Bugle, in which, in the comics, he was a supporter of superheroes. He wasn't against them. Uh, I mean, he was even for Spider-Man when J. Jonah Jameson was lamb blasting Spider-Man. But no, okay. But and I like the Incredible Hulk movie. True, it's not one of the greatest, but I really loved it. I was like, finally, a fun, cool Hulk movie. Because the Ang Lee one, all it was amazing spectacle and whatnot, it was very heavy. And a lot of people, in which, looking back, I realized, I can understand why not very many people could get into the Hulk movie. Because, in a way, it's a balancing act. In which I remember reading about from Frank Miller when he was doing Batman Year One, in which you got a balance of what to make the characters great and the comic books and all that stuff, yada yada yada. But you got to balance like realism and human elements. So yeah, and what else? Yeah, and when finally we got to see Thanos, see Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, man, those movies were so good. And I thought the way that they handled those stories was just genius. The Russo brothers clearly were the right ones to direct the movies. And everyone was shocked, including me, of how Infinity War ended. And you know what? I thought that was genius, because in my mind I'm thinking, how are they going to tackle this? I mean, one, what they could do is what Joss Whedon kind of did with the first Avengers, in which it was all tied around Loki and the Avengers, like, closing on them, in which it wasn't a case, but I thought, the easiest way to do this is to make Thanos the main character of the story, where it's his story. Not saying he's the hero, but he's the main character, and they took that idea and went with it, and I thought that was so smart. Again, a villain that you can connect to, and you can see where he was coming from his point of view, his ideology, and and it was like so intense. Of like, you see moments like where, oh man, where especially the way some of the action and some of the camera shots were taken to emphasize, like, yeah, like Thanos was the main character of the story, where it's like it seemed like it was all him, all alone against the Avengers. Not to say that they were the bad guy, but it made it seem that way, where you easily sympathize with Thanos' character, and yet you're terrified of him. That he has the conviction and he's willing to do whatever it takes, and he has what it takes to like get what he does done. And and at first I was like totally like against like his new look, but then I thought about it and I was like, you know what? It looks good. And I remember I was like very touchy about like, changing looks for movies, like Captain America's spy look for Captain America Winter Soldier, of like fingerless gloves, and same thing for Flash. But once you see it on screen, it turns out really well, and it made sense, because Thanos, he got 2 of the Infinity Stones in the Gauntlet, and even one of his followers even stated no one has ever wielded 2 Infinity Stones before. And Thanos like takes off his armor, which is basically an adaptation of Thanos' look into what made him look like. Because Thanos at this point, he's old, he's tired, he's more sympathetic, and to like, in a way, like, very connects more with people, in which he's lost a lot, in which his daughters turned on him and whatever. And yeah, and in his mind, he's the hero of the story, and he takes his armor off as a sign, like, you know what? I'm not a warrior anymore. I'm this spiritual prophet, where I will teach about that. And the way he acted was the case, because old Thanos is very different from younger Thanos, in which Thanos is this bloodthirsty, like, guy in which he's all about taking on all of his enemies, like, not afraid of shedding blood, while old Thanos is, like, remembering of, like, who he was, where he was at, of what started him on his journey. So yeah, and I thought that was genius to do that, and in my mind, it's like, how are you gonna take on someone, character-wise, of, like, someone who worships death and, like, really, like, loves her so much and whatnot. And I thought it was smart that they didn't follow through with that. They just ultimatize him, basically ultimatize him, where basically more relatable, took out death, in which the Red Skull he took on as death. Not that they have a where they loved each other. No, it just he was the one on like, here he was considered one of the most, if not the most, terrifying forms of villainy, in which he was a Nazi, basically, still is, but he's more of a shadow of his former self, in which that is terrifying, in which it shows, in which Red Skull was looking for the Cosmic Cube, which it was the Space Stone, and it cost him everything. He's a shell of a man, well, and in a way, it was kind of a warning to Thanos of if he was going to continue down that path, but Thanos still went through, and again, his reasoning for the movie was to, one, make sure what happened on his world, of, like, his world going hungry without food and many people dying, where it didn't happen again. And I thought, man, one, that is totally universally relatable, and two, that is terrifying. Someone with the convictions of a hero who thinks he's a hero, but he's doing horrible things. In which that's, again, one of the greatest traits of great villains, in which they're the hero of this story. So, in their own mind. But, yeah, and how half of everyone dusted, that was, like, really powerful, and I can totally see why the MCU movies didn't really have a movie ending where the bad guys won, except for, like, Civil War, in which that was, like, a huge difference, but no one really died and all that, but it was, like, a huge personal toll, in which I love that kind of story too, in which trust is broken, and basically friendships are broken as well. And so yeah, and I thought it was very poignant how Endgame brought things together, where Cap and Iron Man, they made it up to one another of what they did to each other, in which I thought that was clever. Is like, Captain America wasn't totally all the way right, because he hid from Tony how his parents really died, and I thought that was great. Where and another thing is that Captain America, for a guy who is so heroic and so always all noble and infallible, in which he's a human being, in which I think that is great character development. Stay true to the character, but still not always perfect. In which that's, before the MCU, one of the downsides of Captain America is that he was always right. He was always good, always perfect. In which, and here's the thing, Superman and Captain America, they're not always right. They're not always perfect. They're still human beings, even though one of them is Kryptonian, but still, you get what I'm meaning by being human. But yeah, and I'll talk more in the next one. But thank you guys so much. I do appreciate you guys following my channel for your support. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and join our Facebook group, and share with your friends. See ya!